Okay, so welcome, guys. I hope everything went well the last week. I know with the holidays, things are crazy and it's hard to do all the homework, so don't worry about that stuff. We'll be going over new things today in general, but uh, we can still retouch on the things that we had issues during the feedback section of the lesson. But today, for week 4 of our class, we are going to be going over interior spaces. So some of the things that come with interiors are getting used to working inside a space, making that space interesting. A lot of the things that we want to go into are going to be manipulating simple primitives, in one case cylinders, and understanding connection points. Connection points are written, or as I've seen the name talked about, by Paul Richards, who has a blog site called Art War. And I'll pull that up this lesson. It's very good. Along with interiors comes a lot of stuff to fill in. So we'll be going over creating assets, then working on gestural suggestions, because it's very easy to get lost in the mechanics of an interior. And along with that, we'll be thinking about composition for interiors. Stuff like this can be paths and grouping, shape arrangements. And a fun just wealth of knowledge comes from one of Feng Zhu's recent videos that I adore, but we're going to go over that next week, which is interior design. So here we're just going to be sketching, getting comfortable with the basics, but the design portion has a lot of fun stuff to think about. Okay, so interior spaces. When we think about those, it's often about, let's get this set up. It's about creating a space and drawing inside of it, usually for the function of some sort of intended character or theme or space. It can be confusing at times about how to get scaling properly. Oftentimes you can get yourself in a hole if you're not used to sketching, where you think that, oh, I've only got this one space, I can't go any farther, that's all how do I go farther? How do I make the space bigger? So confusion with scaling, confusion with depth, all that sort of thing can often come into play. So let's go over general interior space. If we have a horizon line set here, let's put that on a new layer. And maybe this is going to be, some sort of sci-fi space. It's easy with primitive shapes to come up with something like that. An interior space can be anything from a long hallway to a large building hall. In this case, we'll go for a sort of long hallway. So what I'm getting in here is general layout. I know that an ellipse in perspective is going to flatten out in degree the closer it gets to the horizon line. And if we really want to get that scale in, we can continue to follow these lines back and shrink this even more. And now you have this massive grand space that recedes in depth. I also want to have these go back. So if we wanted to, I don't know, let's say match this up to a halo aesthetic. Let's look that up. Halo Infinite Forerunner interior. See if we get that yet. Okay, here's some stuff. It's a very small image. How about that? That'll work. So I want to mirror some of the shape language here. I've got a layout. I've got these boxes that continue down. Maybe they'll keep going down. I'll get some extra geometry in here by extending that out, extruding, thinking about extrusions. How can we pull apart boxes that we have just by using simple primitives to extend and create complexity within our initial layout? That's something that you'll want to get used to is, oh, I've got this simple line. This can be a bridge, right? So if we want to, we can begin adding additional depth and geometry, giving it a handrail, coming down in depth, and now this goes like this. I can erase these lines so that it opens up at the circles. Follow this ellipse so that these guardrails follow the circle around. Let me know if anything is becoming too difficult to follow, if I'm moving too quickly. Does everything make sense for how I'm navigating all this in perspective so far? Maybe so.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, cool. And so if I want to mirror this to, or start replicating some Halo shape language, then I'll bring this down in opacity. And I'll start adding in some of these hard diagonals. I like that about forerunners. So here in the distance, I'll start. Forerunner spaces are often marked by these hard angles. Okay, so we got those. Next, we'll get these in the front. I'm going to change how it looks just a little. One thing we can talk about here is beveling. So if we have a box and it's this way, I'm seeing in the Forerunner architecture that the corner is sheared off. There's another plane that's facing this direction when the other ones are like this. Easy way to do that when you have this walled off is to just break up the corner of your box and now follow that up instead. So now we got that sheared corner. I'll repeat this shape just a few times. and do the same here. A thing to know about diagonals when sketching them repeatedly is that they do follow their own converging vanishing point. So if this one is reaching all the way up here, it could be really shallow, but if in time, the diagonal over here is going to converge a little bit more. Mine might be too dramatic, but we'll just go with it. Okay, so oh, I'm going off canvas. I don't need to be doing that. Sorry, guys. I forgot. In YouTube, we got Eduardo chiming in and saying hello. Hey, buddy. Okay, so we have the bones of a space. We've got this bridge area. We've got platforms. We've got forerunner architecture, shape design. If we want to detail this out, it's going to take ages. And for especially sci-fi and hard surface, you don't want to get things wrong. It's going to take so long to get this all right that we can start thinking about asset sheets. And that is a very powerful and effective method for improving your speed in interiors. If I want to start making paneling, I can design that out on its own. So I see these forerunner pillars off to the side. Let's see. Look like this. We got these long panels. Within those panels, they're divided. And they continue to mirror that diagonal shape language. Follow up. So let's make sure that we get some paneling in there. They have layered lines. That's a very effective method for getting realism or just depth to your line work, as well as to double up your lines at any point. For instance, when you draw a door, and maybe that door is in a home, standard suburban home, it's going to look much more believable. And this is going to touch on connection points later as well, but it's going to look more believable to double up on your lines. For one, this could be the crown molding at the bottom, but two, you give that additional depth on things. You got a place where the doorknob is and it's attached this way, add another line there. It's instant depth, so that's a good thing for getting extra believability going. Oftentimes it can be missed, so just mentioning it now. But forerunner architecture, we got paneling, we got crazy zigzags and straight lines, diagonals, followed by more straight lines. So I can try using that shape language, or I can make my own. If I want to make a panel, perhaps I will take this, copy it out, and rotate it. Maybe I think that I like this diagonal shape, but I don't want the straight. So I'll copy this. And then maybe I'll add just a black section. This looks like an overhang. And then add one more thing. So now this is a panel. And we can reuse that panel plus this shape language in different areas. So let's copy that one specifically. I should have drawn it closer to a grid, but this will still be effective. We start adding this in. So using the distort or transform tool, whatever it's called for you guys, you can bring this into perspective and then quickly copy out another one. This will all work better when you're working tighter. I've got varying levels of looseness and accuracy in the geometry. So panels, excellent. Now let's look at what else we might want. I'm going to erase this part out. You won't be able to see it. Next, maybe I want a floor texture for this. I'm going to keep my sketch up while I draw this so that I have a better frame of reference. In the image, I'm seeing that they have like these trenches of lines that you'll have one thing and then maybe this goes down like that. So that's interesting to think about. Maybe we will start with a square rectangle. And I will draw straight lines like so. I'll add just a little bit of diagonals. Something that maybe will hopefully add some interest. And now I'll shrink this down and start duplicating it. You can duplicate really quickly once you start merging them together. And now we have twice the length. Shrink down just a little more and get another set in. Ah, crap. Procreate crashed. Good job. Freezes up sometimes, which is very annoying. Okay. So we got this. I'm going to start warping this into perspective. Whoa. So when you do this, you want to worry about convergence. The lines are going to get real small at the end. So there's one. And now I'll just pull this one over here. Eduardo on YouTube saying that this method looks really interesting. Yeah, it's very powerful. Once it's kind of mind-blowing that we don't think about the utility that digital gives us until it's shown. And then you think, wow, how could I not have done this before? But it's so useful. So I'll consider taking this away for ring again and just working with them on the straights here. Now this can go down. I'm very loosely thickening things up. So now the main walkway is more in this central area. And we'll just get some basic lines here. Okay. All right, so we'll finish this up. We'll wrap this up quickly so we can move on to other things. But we'll worry about repetitive details. So things like I'm going to double up on this handrail. I will, let's see, I'll shear it to keep that forerunner language in check. By doubling this up, you can get opportunity for coupling. So by doing that, that gives you this smaller space to work in. So it's all about extruding and subtracting for added geometric detail when you're thinking about detailing scenes, especially in sci-fi. I'll do the same over here. Then we'll just get looser the more things go into space. Depth-wise, I mean. We'll erase out all the unnecessary stuff. And we'll finish out this sketch very roughly. Okay, so if I want to add some other quick sci-fi details, what am I seeing? I'm seeing hexagons. Good interior design is about following form language. And form language is nothing more than identifying simple shapes, things like hexagons, diagonals, straight lines with this, shearing. All of this adds into a form language that makes something understandable and recognizable to a theme. If you can identify those and break those down in an environment, you can reapply those to your own scenario to maintain uniformity in your form language. Okay, so we're almost finished. I'm not thinking too hard during this process. I'm just seeing this is a bridge. The bridge has a straightaway. And what else do forerunners use when they have straights? They use diagonals. So I'm just following that down, continuing the process, and I'll add in those breaks that are suggested here in the foreground. Then we can add some focus to the center, design the circle out with some circular shape. It'll break things up and bring interest by the fact that it is circular. Okay, how about that? So, interior space, just like that. It's so simple, not really. Let's talk about things that you can do to help understand getting to this point. Anything people want to ask about first before we move on? No? Okay. I'll add some verticals just to show we've got some implied verticality to this whole thing. I'm thickening up these lines just so we have an understanding of what's in the foreground and what's not. Okay, sketch. Okay, Alexander's typing something. I'll let him type it up and go through what I want to cover next, which would be cylinders and connection points. Okay. So Alexander is asking, how can I improve reading and extracting the form language from an image? Sometimes it just feels like I look at reference and I don't analyze it properly. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We'll start with something simple. And we will cover architecture in a future lesson as well for exterior spaces. But let's pull up Mayan. Well, let's go to Google. Mayan architecture. Okay. We bring this up. Oh, this is good too. We can see multiple ideas. All right, so I'm looking at all of these. When we look at something like Mayan architecture, we see we can start with just trying, if it's difficult to break down the form language, let's try just drawing from a reference real quick. So I'll look at this one. And so if I try redrawing that on the side here, I'm seeing a box. I'm seeing a lot of squarish forms, right? So I'm seeing step patterns. This isn't a proportion at all, but it's the form breakdown that we're concerned about. And then you can have a path, and you've got stairs. Then you've got big layered terracing. So if we wanted to extend that sort of form language into our own design, we would look at some of the things that are at play here. We can even look at this one. Mayan architecture is rudimentary primitives, and the main shapes that we're seeing would be like in this shape here at the top of this tower. While it is still primarily a box, we can also look at this front plane and identify that there is this shape if we look at it from an orthographic view. You can now reuse that and apply that anywhere that you could think about. So if you wanted to make a building with that shape, you could. You could then, let's copy it out. You can stretch it, you can distort it, place it in perspective, and then extrude. So it'd be a little weird for a whole building to be shaped like this hat shorted structure, right? So maybe that's just the top, and then you have this short and squat area underneath. And if you wanted that to be similar in form language as well, you can see how other buildings have blockish pillars, like big mega block Legos. And so we'll add those in. Okay, then you see that this can come out, and we've got some layering of materials. I see that they introduce general complexity by just bringing the square edges out more. They'll layer that up a few times. And maybe at the top, we just have this slight bend inward with some Mayan looking stone patterning. We can just break it up and add in that hexagon. Not hexagon, but that spiral square shape. Then you can, if we want to add some windows so they can see, follow the line and then follow the actual vertical vanishing point. Now you can have window spaces. Okay, so that. But if we looked at something more difficult, so let's think I don't know. I've been playing Halo, so it's what I'm thinking of. We think about Covenant architecture Halo, and put that back into Google instead, not Bing. Okay, so let's look at some. This is especially useful. We've got just designs from talented artists on ArtStation. So what we're seeing here is a representation of form language. When we think about Covenant ships or even Covenant buildings, we think about curves. It's alien. It's organic. So maybe this was inspired by some sort of plant or flower or that sort of thing, which is a higher design concept. But if you wanted to think about form language, you can see, okay, well, if we have this main building shape and it comes up and then has a bulging at the top where it gets a slightly little larger. Now, any paneling that I see here looks like it's following the curve with some slight hard edges to give it that sci-fi feel, but they're rounded off some. This reminds me of Nike golf clubs as well. Add some silhouette complexity by bringing that out and then paneling it back over. Okay, so that's what we see. If we want to apply that to our own building, our own Forerunner building, we'll think about large curves, bulbous shapes, things like this. And we can try to just quickly draw something. So I want a covenant idea. I see we can either have large at the bottom or small at the bottom, larger at the top, as long as it's going to have that sort of swooping organic effect. I want to give that base platform in, and then maybe it's supported, like I see here, with organic spires. And maybe this big one is more like this, where it comes up and has a tip. This one can have some firmer attachments at the bottom. So what we're doing here is we're looking at these because these can be translated into perspective. It's easier to start with your design ideas from an orthographic straight-on perspective and then think about what it could possibly look like when it's in 3D. And so if you were to, like with last week's lesson where you have things going into a box, they don't all have to be box-like. I didn't mention that last week because it's easier to start with boxes. But if you wanted to place a circular form within the box, you can. The box is representational of items in your sketch. But let's say we have the space here, and in perspective, that large bulbous point was extruded upwards like this. So maybe behind this, it goes back. Let's bring this up. So I want this to be like this, and I want to mirror that that paneling effect back here. Now I'm going to have this connection point that extrudes upwards into the bulbous area. Are these that similar? I'm not sure. That's up to you guys to decide for me, because I've never tried this before. But the general idea of breaking down form language is as so. Okay, so maybe if I were to try making my own Halo IP or designs, I would be working with that sort of breakdown. And the more accurate you are, the more thought you give it, and try to get used to drawing the subject matter that you have. So you can start with a general process of study, breakdown, and try reapplying. If you follow that process, usually by the time you get to the third one, you might have a general understanding of the feel of what you're going for. And I hope that helps. I'm going to move on real quick, but if I still have it pulled up, when I was looking at that form language with the forerunner for an interior space, I was seeing shapes like this, a lot of diagonals, and down in the bottom left corner, I see this big diagonal cutout shape. And then little lights. So you can take that into your own thing where you can make panels, or you can make forms where they have diagonals within them. They have slightly alternating diagonals or just general repeating. Maybe the little lights are down here, plus a couple here. Double it up for depth, shear it off for that extra space, and then make another one. But in between it, add some connection points, that sort of thing. So you can do that. You can say that's not enough. I want it to come up diagonally this way, and then it's going to do this, and then it'll do that, because diagonal shapes, that sort of thing. That could become Forerunner, or it could become your own sci-fi language that was inspired by what you had studied from. So I hope that helps, Alexander. Okay, so next we are going to be going over connection points. I think a friend had just recently pinged that to me, so I'm going to look that up. No. Is this what we want? Yes, it is. This is the right page. So these are some great blog sites to look through whenever you find the time. I'll copy this link. His name is Paul Richards. He is a prolific designer, for one, but he has some great tidbits and notes talking about good design on his personal old blog page. Now, one of the things that is important for drawing and designing interior spaces is what does he call this? Connections, transitions, and caps. So this is what he calls sniping detail. So let's read this. He's talking about how to focus your areas on a focal point, areas of rest, areas of busyness, 70-30 rule, all good design principles. But one way that you can instantly add complexity to your design is by thinking about connection points. And I really love this one, so I'm focusing on it. It applies well in interiors. We've got a pipe that he shows in this image demo. We've got a brick wall. This is boring. How do we make this more believable? How do we design this out? We don't have to go crazy. We just have to follow and extrude and subtract from the forms that are already there. This is a great way to build complexity in architecture and interior spaces. We need connection points. We need additional extrusions. So a cylinder, this cylinder is following this line. In space, the opening would be like that. Well, it needs an elbow, most likely. It's probably that these two were two cylinder pipes, that are then joined by a larger elbow. That elbow has to be able to fit the additional pipes within it. That elbow itself might be screwed on. Maybe it's got some bolts of its own keeping it in place. So we can take that principle in mind and just think about how this was actually constructed. And build an elbow around it. Maybe I'll imply some screws there, and then we'll add, like he demonstrates, a connection platform. So this is a panel with its own depth. We can even add complexity to that with some hexagonals. That has to be drilled into the floor. And then this isn't just going to connect. It either needs its own coupling with its own little panel here, or you could do what it appears that he did, was turn it into some sort of screw. So the same goes here. You need a way to pin this to the wall, so there's some general screw locations. And look at that. Now you have a designed pipe. If you were to try and make your own pipes, do you have to have a good frame of reference? No, not really. What if you had just a cylindrical container, right? You can just extrude in and out of this container. I'm going to follow that cut idea from the Forerunner, from the Covenant stuff, which is just breaking into the silhouette and then pulling it in some. Add some small little fidget details there, and then top it off. Place for screws. This is going to pull back some. Maybe it needs a panel. And from that, we took a cylinder and we made some sort of Buzz Lightyear looking thing. Did I have a frame of reference? No. All I did was think about connection points of attaching primitives, removing complexity by extruding, which would be, if we have a box, that would be pulling something out along its same vanishing points. We extrude it this way, and subtracting, which would be moving along vanishing points to take away space from an object. And this can apply to lots of different things, like he shows, when we are drawing something in interiors or even exteriors. You have a prop, you have a barrel, which again would be another cylinder. You don't want just a simple shape like this. You want to have, things that hold the barrel together. Those need to be screwed on, so maybe they've got these attachments. On top of this, you have additional stuff. It's got a way to open, it's got a little flap. So all that, just thinking about how it's constructed. But in addition, when you have things in a space, you can think about video games and how they guide the player. So let's say we've got a room, and we have a player character that comes in, and you want to get them from this door over to this door. You don't want this guy to walk around and go into these corners. Not necessarily. You want to be able to guide him along an interesting path that utilizes this space. So if you want to walk him this way, if you're playing an action game like Bloodborne or Dark Souls, what do? They add spooky skeletons that are laying on things with a bunch of barrels and pots. Over here, you got a bunch of boxes. In general, a big key component is that you can't see the floor. It's covered because 90-degree angles are boring. That's one of the things that we're gathering from this need for connection points. Just a floor is boring. We want transitioning that takes us from that floor, like crown molding, that normalizes things, plus boxes in the corner, plus grit and dirt, masses of interest. Okay, I see that my stream just kicked out. We're getting back in action. Let's see. Any moment now. Sorry, guys. I think the problem is it thinks it's still streaming, so it's not reconnecting. Okay, let's try closing this down real quick. Man, okay. Bear with me while I wait for this to restart, because stopping mirroring or doing anything. Well, that is very annoying. Am I still here? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh man. Wow. Okay, so I'm reconnected. Let's. Okay, need to make sure if my stream is still going. I'd be surprised if it is.
I think it lost connection on YouTube because I'm watching it and it stopped.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Remembering how to work. It goes in and out of like, I've got internet. No, I don't. Okay. Well, I feel really bad about you holding you guys up and gotta wait for the iPad to boot up. And all right. Okay, we're back. Let me know if anything has issues. We'll just jump right back in. I was talking about transitions and connection points for larger spaces. And, oh, gotta reconnect my pencil. Okay, so transition points for larger spaces. If we've got a door, we want to think about how to make that door come alive. It needs stuff like this. Maybe there's bricks, and you can transition bricks away. You want general things running along this ground because everything has some sort of transition to it. If you look at the baseboards in your house, if you look at the feet of a table, in general, things look more natural when they have something that leads into another. And I'll go back to the Paul Richards site. He even talks about it with a sword here, where a basic sword is not that interesting. But then you try transitioning it in creative ways. By breaking into it, tapering, expanding. Those are other forms of transition points. The handle isn't just a block, but it's got a cap. And that cap has its own things of stability. Then you taper this off at the edges, and voila, you have a more unique and interesting sword design. So if we think about that here, maybe we've got a massive things. This is barrels. This is a big chest. Maybe there's some sort of like massive candles on the floor for some reason. It's like a what do hex symbols look like? Just kind of like graffiti. This sort of thing with blood and dead people. We might pile this up so it's a little harder to see the other side. And we do not want them going this way. So we'll add a big piece of furniture here. It's got a shelf. It's got all sorts of things in it. But then it's walled off. We've got another piece of furniture that fell onto it. So you can't look at it even if you wanted. Everything that was on that fell out, and now all that stuff is on the floor. And it's blocking off the way. So you fill all that up, and now you've got a path of an interior space that leads over here. And all I'm thinking about when doing that is just, one, how do we guide a path? How do we guide the eye? And two, how do we transition 90-degree angles in an interior so that we can avoid those harsh breaks? We want to get rid of that. So, good things to keep in mind. All right. Okay, so next would be sketching interiors gesturally. The last thing that I want you guys to get caught up on is building an interior and taking ages to do it. I used to have that problem, and that's just no good. We want to avoid that at all costs. So let's build out a few canvases. Okay, merge those, duplicate. There we go. Okay, so we need some perspective. Maybe it's a low horizon line, and we've got perspective like this. Maybe this one goes up. What else do we have? Maybe this one is like this. So what I'm going to go through here is that there are a few opportunities in interior spaces for composition. We've got tunnels. We've got circles or spaces. We have point of interest. And a tunnel is basically, guiding us down somewhere. A circle or a space would be in a big room. Maybe you have this big gathering area with stuff around it that is designed to go there. A point of interest would be we have a room and there's something significant somewhere and we want to lead the eye to it by focusing on that. Okay, so let's think of this one would be good for a point of interest. Even better, let's do a low horizon line, 1-point perspective. So I want to draw like it's a big TV screen and it's watching people. Like think the Dark Knight, like watching room that Lucius Fox makes. Maybe there's a bunch of other TVs and they're all leaning forward so that we can view them more easily. And we'll really just go crazy with it. So this whole room, we want to, maybe the walls are back here. So we've got these leading lines that focus off and section this large TV here. And maybe there's something interesting going on in it. Okay. Is my stream freezing up for you guys? It looks like it. I'm moving around, but you're not seeing it. Wow, this is a bummer. Okay. We'll make do with what we've got. So I'm balancing out smaller shapes, bigger shapes, and then I've got all this laid out. And now I want to think about connection points for this area, right? So if we have televisions, what do these televisions need to really transition out this space? Well, they might have, something on the back to help it be mounted. Maybe that is like this. Maybe there's additional stuff. If we want this to keep going, what if we just group this all together and really just make this absurd, right? So we want this to be a crazy watch room. We'll put even small screens here that don't matter, but they matter to this guy. Yeah, so we can gesture in. The point of this is gestural interiors. And we want to keep that in mind. So when we think about gesturing, I've got these larger spaces. I have these arcs in here. I can think about adding lines for depth and implying that they are cables. So whenever the stream decides to catch up, I'll couple all this together with a larger brace, have some pinch points, things like that will, in general, show a lot of believability and depth to the whole idea. So now we have these large cables. I want to gesture up to this larger TV screen. So I'm going to build like a big wall of cabling. That's pretty amusing. I like the idea. So just a massive watch room. All of these screens, they need some sort of stand or base. Hey Kushik, thanks for the compliment. I'm happy to help. If we want to transition these, what started as boxes, but maybe they can be a desk, we think about, okay, well, a desk can come out like this. Maybe it's got a blank area in the middle. I am transitioning those 90-degree edges away from being boring. That's the important part. The chair can have some sort of tapering here, and then the feet itself will taper some as well. So now we've got a relatively complete concept for an interior that you gestured in with basic shapes. And that's what I want us to get used to here. So basic shapes, transitions, going from big to small, adding quick complexity by thinking of natural transitionary detail. Let's think of another example. I'll have a large, let's go for tunnel composition. And maybe I want the tunnel to be, so it's going down. Maybe we have stairs, right? So I'm drawing on the wrong layer, that's why. Okay. All right, so stairs. Easy way to do stairs is to think of it receding and going down so that the next one comes out. So if you just bring the next one further down and a little bit smaller, you can easily show stairs going down. And then we'll finally be down, and then it'll be some cobblestones. Okay, so a door. It comes up. We'll make this a more significant shape. We'll double up lines, and then we'll have transitions to go here, and then you can continue to see it go down. Okay, so tunnel composition, we want things to go that way. Maybe this is in 3 points since we're looking down. And now I think, what can we add here? Well, maybe we want things to lead in this direction. So I'll gesture in a big shape that kind of gets smaller like this. And this one like this. One of the things that just breaks your composition, especially in interiors, is corners. So you want to think about, because again, even compositionally, a corner is a 90-degree angle. And what do we want to avoid? To avoid in interiors, I'll write it out. This is bad. Use red. So how do we avoid that? Well, we can fill it up with more stuff. And we can think about either pushing this away, so maybe it's a curve of some kind, maybe that becomes an architectural idea. So just in general, this fills that corner. Here we want to wall this off. Maybe there's a foreground element that's in the way. And we'll do the same with all of these. It doesn't have to be just stuff that takes away the corners with a curve. You can remove that corner by building onto more things. I need to remember this is in 3 point. Like that. So going in with the idea of this being gestural, we want to think in large shapes that are pointing compositionally. Think back to the previous week's lesson where we talked about landscape environment sketching, where we have major shapes and then we're grouping in larger masses so that we can have something like this that becomes interesting because of the gestural path that we make for it. We want to apply that to interiors as well. So I have this, and we have this major shape. That's our main path that we're following. I have another gesture that's coming like this that is still pointing to that wall. And everything that I'm putting in is pointing or blocking off corners. That's what we're trying to demonstrate here. If I want to add detail to that, you can just start imagining what these are. Maybe there are a bunch of pipes. Maybe this is a shady corner, right? So I'm going to have this pipe, and then I can make some smaller ones. And let's see what else. This can be a bunch of, maybe this is windows. Each of those windows needs some sort of transitionary element, so I'm just adding basic lines. That's what I'm thinking of when I'm going through this, is just what kind of stuff grounds it to the elements that we see. And last, I'll add things like this can be some sort of terracing is larger. So it's not meant to be the stairs exactly. And we have things that run down it to show the depth. So now it feels like this really grungy place because of all these pipes. We got a space. If we want to, so that was a tunnel composition. This one was a point of interest. If I want to show a circle space, let's think about it here. Maybe we have it. Again, it doesn't have to be a circle. It's just lost connection. Hope my computer doesn't go out again. I got scared for a bit. It looked like I lost connection. Let's see. We can have large open spaces at a low horizon line or a high horizon line, which is what I'm trying to get across here. A big courtyard. And it's meant to be a gathering area, so we got people. Lots of people. And maybe this is a bunch of halls, or the important part is that it opens up to another wide space where you can see things in the background. So when you're drawing these, when we do our homework, the important thing that I want people to keep in mind is to start with the gesture. Leading lines. Oops. Oh, we got some people typing. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. I'm sorry. Okay. I apologize for the technical difficulties this time. I wish I had control, but I do not. So the process, if I can get a hold of my life, composition, gesture, leading lines, subject matter. Transitions. So that general process, if this were, I don't know, let's say a table. Let's actually match it up. So we've got this. This is a circle or a space. Maybe there is a chair here with lots of smaller chairs. The important part when I'm thinking about gesturing something in is that we can fix this in perspective once we have our idea, once we have our space. It's more important that we understand what we're trying to do first before we go in and we start worrying about rote perspective. And there's a lot of personality that you can gain from avoiding linear perspective grids too early on. So by doing this, maybe we want this to be some sort of like recognizable Hall of Champions, let's say. So maybe this is a big fireplace with its own step. It's got its own bricks, fire. Thinking about transitions this whole time. Adding these chairs in. And so what else could we have? What transitions a table to the floor? Oftentimes people put rugs underneath. Long rug that adds leading lines. Can decorate it so that it's not just a square, which again is a transition. Transition those corners. And what can we do to avoid having stuff in the corners here? Maybe there is a piece of furniture with candles on it that's overlooking the set. Maybe over here we have some sort, what could be here? If we add this in, I'll keep it in, make this make sense with the room. But let's think about I'm thinking a chandelier. Chandelier could possibly make sense up here. And then last, we would add, so that we block off the actual literal corner in the room, another piece of furniture. Okay. Let me know if that is making sense to you guys. Is there anything that you want me to point out with these last two frames, or we might just move on to other subjects? Anything that you guys are curious about or wondering, how did that work? How do you do that? What do I need to do when doing something? Go ahead and ask if you like. I will check what else we need to talk about. Yeah. Okay, Alexander says we can move on. Rafi says it makes sense. One last thing that I remember to talk about, that I will talk about before we move on, is grouping, which I covered a little bit in the last session. But that would be in the sense of like, if you have a room and we want to group and lead the eye to something of interest that isn't at the focal point, it's not necessarily a tunnel composition, it's elsewhere on the page. Maybe it's a bedroom, right? We are going to be going, let's see, we have a room, and maybe the table is here, and that's a really high table. It's going to be a corner, an L table. And we've got somebody, it's an artist. They're drawing on their massive tablet, because that's realistic. Okay, so what do we do if we want to lead the eye to them? Because we've got the door here, and we don't want it to necessarily, we don't want the door to be interesting first. Well, let's block off this space. Let's add a foreground element with this bed. We can block off that corner with the pillow here. And add some whatever. The door can be slightly open, let's say. That way, if this were to be lit, it wouldn't necessarily be that the door is open. It can be slightly open. But I want to lead the eye to him. So I think about gestural lines that can go from here and here. I want to add stuff that goes along this area so that everything is leading back to him. So what can these be? That's a door, so it doesn't make sense to have a window. So maybe I'll put the window here. Really high window. That window needs cutouts. It needs blinds. Really messy blinds. It needs a little line. Do windows usually have sills on the inside? Yeah, some they will have molding. So there's a window. Then we've got a smaller poster. A smaller poster. This is still his table. So we'll transition that table. And above it, we'll put, like if he's an artist, well, hey, this can be kind of like my room. So microphone here. It's on a stand. Then we've got, we can have, I don't have these, but I've seen them, little soundproofing patterns. Let's rewind, make this. Maybe he has, small papers and post-it notes that are hanging around to remind himself of what he needs to do. And then we've got speakers. In general, desk clutter. It doesn't matter what they are, I'm just gesturing them in because they can be figured out later. Then here, some sort of thing. So those are supposed to be guitars. Do they look like them? Not yet, no. But we know where we want them to be. So that's my point with interior sketching, is gestures, thinking of the composition. And here I was thinking of shape grouping, so I had these gestural lines leading like this. If we were to think about lighting it, then maybe it could be something like where it's a really dramatic light, and then that shape is going to come in and highlight things. So then I was, thinking about how that can work. Yeah. So everything, both the lines and the eventual lighting, are going to be creating leading lines that add to the focal point that you want. Okay. That, I think, covers everything that I wanted to talk about. Um, some extra things for quick and easy detail is I was watching Will Weston, and he was talking about cylinders and their importance for things like mad science laboratories, grungy areas. When you draw cylinders, you don't want to just make things perfect. That's boring. If you have, like, say we're looking up at the ceiling, you have ducts that are here. Well, you want some that are massive, and then you want some that are small. So they don't have to be perfect. The less perfect you make them, the grungier and dingier they'll look. They'll have a lot of personality to them. You can add the coupling here. You can add some sort of elbow, make that larger, make it go up. And then these larger shapes don't have to be just one big pipe. You can start massing in extra pipes within it. Remind people that these are cylinders that you're looking at by just adding random things. Stuff like that will add a lot of personality really quickly, but not everything can be a mad scientist's laboratory. So what else can you add? You can do, if you did boxes, then those boxes can, instead of just coming down, you can often, man, lost connection again. Okay, just wait for the iPad to figure it out. Okay, we're back. You can quickly fan out the tops, often the edges, or I mean the bottoms. You can portion things out so that large on the outsides, maybe there's a small one in the middle, or the opposite is true, small on the edges. What I'm thinking about when making these is thinking of like 60, 40, 70, 30. If you have a box, then you can have it this way, but then it this way, which, look at that, that's 1/3. This is 2/3. It's twice the length of this one. You can do that the opposite direction. So quick details like that will instantly add a lot of life to your scene. If you want things to get a little more stylized, you can think about wonkiness, where boxy objects are often heavier on top. Nothing is purely straight. If the cars, for instance, are often like this, the cars in animation are smaller, but they have tops that are twice as tall. Maybe they have got a lean to them. And then if you wanted to, make the wheels really small. So that sort of wonk will, you can think about that. So if we were to readjust this one, I want to make the bottom smaller. Let's see. Would have just been easier to erase this. Now it's going to come up, and it's going to be at an angle that doesn't quite make sense. And then this is going to come out. And if we want it to be a container of sorts, then in general, the more gesturally that you draw, the more fun it's going to look since it has energy to it. But there's a science to stylizing things, which I haven't quite yet mastered myself. Okay, that helped, just distorting it enough that we got a new idea from it. So I'm erasing this and making the top larger. And then that might be a more stylized type of box set dressing that you could use. Okay, so Gandalus is asking, I have a general question. If I want to start a painting, should I make many rough thumbnails or only make a few, but tweak them until I like them? It's about focus. I received that feedback when I took a class with Tyler Edlin a year and a half ago at this point, where I did a bunch of thumbnails for architecture design. I had like 15 of them, and all of them were different from the last. And I was just really running myself through I can't think of the right word, but I'm just really wringing myself over trying to come up with something that looks right. Tyler is like, it looks like you're confused and you don't know what you want to do. So because of that, he said that things didn't really feel like they had a direction in mind. And while that could be good for finding ideas, if I never settled on anything, then what he recommended was start with 2 or 3 designs, stop there, and instead you can iterate off of them. If you're not quite satisfied with what you have, it's also just a good idea in general to iterate once or twice and see if you come up with an improvement. Even still, maybe your first is the best idea, but at least you tried something else, because you could always stumble into something that's better. So, for instance, I've got 5 compositions here. If they were all the same idea, like if they were all going for the same theme, I don't think that I need any more than what I had. Because what I often try to think is from a cinematic perspective of planning. In cinema, it's often about telling the point. What is the purpose of your scene? What's the purpose of your frame? And let's see. I want to get rid of this. Whoops. Okay. Let's say we have an encounter with a girl. Well, once you can see again. But I'll just write while this is waiting. Okay, so let's reconnect. We're back. So, an encounter with a monster and a girl, or a big thing. How many different ways can we communicate that? Well, we can think from the intended point of view first. It's you hear about how the artists fail without planning. Well, even your planning can fail without some planning. So the rabbit hole just goes down infinitely. So if we're planning out our shot for our final image and we think, how can we communicate that? What is the planning for our planning? We think about, okay, we can have a side shot that shows scale. We could have, just every camera view imaginable. We could have a low horizon shot to show scale. We could have a high shot that, maybe they're in a forest or they're in a city and it's showing the separation of them from the outer world. Or maybe there is a 3/4 shot that shows overlap and gets a lot of depth in. Or we could have a layered shot. So those are all of the different ideas that I could think of from using a camera to show two people in a set and get a point across. So if I were to quickly gesture that in, I want a side shot that shows scale. Okay, so I want a big monster guy. This one's actually a scene from Moana, where Moana is here and she's reaching up and she's on a rock here. And then this is like this, and then this is all waterfall. So you got big, you got small. You got a shot from the side. Maybe you've got one with a low horizon line, which is what I did next. And that would be, we can actually mix the low horizon with the layered shot, because you could have a small girl with a really large being. And maybe this is a cliff, and so that's that kind of shot. Then if you have a high shot, it could be from looking up. Maybe this is in a different setting, so we got buildings. And we have this really big thing that's looking down at her, and the little girl's here. The city's been destroyed now. Now it's crumbling, and it's in this crater because it just got hit by a bomb or something. They've been bombing it. And so she walks up, and we've got broken cars, and we've got more broken cars walling off this, and lots of people who are scared and standing away that are, just from an animation compositional idea, how do we most clearly communicate an idea without words? We want to show people are scared, so they're all away, and she's here and she's wanting to talk to it. a 3/4 depth shot, which would be maybe it's a more medium horizon line, more stable, and this is an encounter with a girl, and so he's got a little more depth to him. We can do this and show perspective and overlaps and lots of things going on so that there's more depth in the scene in general. And those are all of my ideas. So that's only 4 compositions, right? And you say, okay, well, I like any number of these, but what if I want, maybe that first idea, the first try wasn't the most successful. So you could then take this one, for example, and you could think, what if I made it, what if it's going in the opposite direction? Because he's got these leading lines pointing down, which could be cool because it's pointing down at the girl, but maybe now he feels just massive because we got this overlap, and let's see, trying to look down, but body's in the way, and a hand, and she's right here. That's the same idea on the same shot. Or you could revise this one and you could think even larger. Then I want to center her and I want this to curve in like this. Now it's cute. And maybe we want some extra depth by throwing in this pathway that leads up. And we revise that by filling in corners and doing that sort of thing. So you can take that shot and continue to iterate it on it until you have something that you like. Maybe you think I need some lift here, so we bring this up and we make it, maybe we add some shapes that are circular. Maybe this is now like a praying grounds with some sort of shrine, and this is where they meet up. So you can continue to roll with your ideas, thinking gesturally first, the same way that you would gesture in the pose for a character. You are gesturing in the ideas for a scene without being too concerned about perspective from the beginning. So, yeah, that's everything that I wanted to cover today. Let's go over, let's group this and look over what we have talked about. Interior spaces, cylinders, assets, gestural suggestions. Okay, so we went over sketching an environment, an interior environment, which started with a room. Same thing can be applied where if you have a canvas, you can block it off, or you can continue to extrude, and then you can have hallways. Maybe there's a platform here. And that can still be an interior space. It's boxes, but now you add walls that take away from it feeling like it's outdoors. You can then fill that in by creating assets. So if you wanted to, you could make wooden planks and then copy that a bunch of times. You could make sci-fi paneling. You can do all sorts of things, anything that's repeatable. Then we covered cylinders and, well, not quite. We talked about form language and appropriating form language. We talked about cylinders and connection points. And then we talked about gesturally sketching interiors, using transitions and connection points, general compositions for interior spaces. We talked about how to quickly add detail to larger masses. Just lost connection again. And then we answered Gandalus's question about when to iterate on a thumbnail or how many thumbnails should you make. Okay, trying to get this back. We'll spend the last hour going over submitted homework. Unable to connect. What is that crap? Wow. I wonder if it's the iPad or if it's the computer. If it fails one more time, I'll try restarting. Okay, good. All right, so homework for this week. I know that we're on holidays, but I'm still just going to assign it as it would be. Homework. We want 30 environment push-ups. So what is a push-up? A push-up is a loose sketch using either primitives or gestures. And it's basically doing the stuff that we were doing in the demo today. If we want it to be more refined than the stuff that I have done, which is just trying to get as many sketches out for demonstration purposes as possible. But in general, any of the ideas that I have shared with you guys before will work. And I want you to experiment and work with all of them, which that means I want stuff like using large shapes, starting with this, and then grouping within it. We want paths, starting with that. Then maybe we want large ideas like this, which can then become something. So you start with gestures and then you clean it up to a reasonable degree. How much of this can you even see? It's lagging so much. My gosh. Or working with boxes if that is still what's necessary. So you can draw boxes. Yikes. Okay. I think I'm still here, barely. I think I'm still just barely there. This is really sorry about this. But 30 environment push-ups. You can do boxes, you can fill those in. You can do shapes. And so of these, we want to split it. Oh, my screen share also dropped. Okay. Can you see my screen, guys? Man. Okay, so it's streaming now. I just realized that it's on my Wi-Fi card, which, I mean, both of them are causing issues, but Wi-Fi 1 is even worse, which is what we're on. But I'm scared if I switch it, then we're going to lose connection. The next time it loses connection, I'll try switching again. Split between 15 exterior, 15 interior. Mid-level finish. So what is a mid-level finish? A mid-level finish would be full geometry, loosely cleaned up. Transitions and connections. Theme is present. Okay. So that should be everything that we're going to do. Okay, so that is a stopping point. That's the full lesson. And from here on out, we're going to be going over homework. I just disconnected again, so I'll try switching my Wi-Fi card. Okay, so we're recording. Homework. Going over homework. So the assignment was to theme out the box compositions that you had. If you weren't satisfied with the boxes that you had previously, you could revise. And what I'm going to do is look for either perspective issues, theming issues, ways you can improve it, or ways to expand the scene, that sort of deal. So this is nice. And I think with this, compositionally, this works. I think in a future shot, you could move him over, not in a future shot, but if you were to do this again, you could move him over so that the horse falls more on here. And maybe there's like people or some sort of thing that adds like stuff coming from the back. In general, I would think about if this is a drawbridge. With theming, you could add windows that show some scale, and then continue this in the background. Some extra towers that add a sort of ribbing component. And if you want to start detailing, you can start adding distress. And distress is just like, so here, okay. Distressing would be one, adding damage. So you can carve out spaces and show some bricks, get closer to your focal point. So if this is stone, then now that we know about transitions and caps, we can add these. Maybe that's there. And you've got these little holes for no reason other than at the time they just had a lot of architectural decorating. But you can think about, usually arches have a keystone brick as well. This big one that comes out and supports all the weight. So you can start there and then slowly go away in detail. So you don't finish your bricks, you kind of spiral outwards and have some stuff like this. Maybe this is an opportunity for a large hole. Maybe the brick has fallen down. And getting rid of 90 degrees. So now we want to think about transitions. I do not know what the bottom looks like here, but transitions don't have to be just geometry. It can also be tall grasses. You can have stuff where people have walked. It can be bushes. So now you have something that has gotten in the way of this, that eliminates that 90-degree transition. I bet that there would be plants and bushes down here. And in general, you would have some rocks. So you could start quickly massing in details to this kind of scene. And so you were really close and you're already there. And granted, I mean, it's not like that was part of the assignment. It was theming out the boxes that you had, which I think you've done a really good job of doing so. Like this, really cool. This is cool. One thing is this just out in the water? Or should this be coming out this way as well so that you can see that it's going in a direction? But otherwise, I think good job, because I see you got this leading line. And it's pretty rote and try hard to do both leading lines. So I like that you chose to come down this way. I say that looks good to me. I think for a village like this, it'd be fun to get a little bit more depth. So you have these boxes here. Maybe they're just small little things, but in general, let's try and add more. I want to keep that open space that you have mostly. So I'm not just going to fill it up. But you layer in these houses, and then you have suggestion of the town really going on in space quite a bit. I would suggest, finding, it can be as simple as barrels. That's always a really simple addition. Barrels and a post, who knows? some sort of trough. And if you wanted to, you can, to work on detailing cobblestone, it can be a lot of work. One, you could do it with asset textures, but then you have to worry about an insane level of detail. It's better to start big shapes, narrow those shapes out as you go into the distance, and then break up those shapes. Find your big, medium, and small. Add your grasses, things that transition these brick walls. This is good here. I see that you are attempting it. So the one thing is that the brick doesn't look too orderly, which you can definitely go for, but it almost looks like it's not possible. So if you want disorderly bricks, you can vary them in size and then slowly transition them away, as long as you know that they have to stack on top of each other. Focus on the dark sides, which is more important in the light, just the shadows that they cast. All of this is looking good. I think there was some fear of extruding in and out, so you can definitely bring these in so that this comes out more, has some depth to it. Add another line to this, and now all of those posts have some realism. So that goes into the little tip I had earlier of double up on your lines so you have depth. That's good though. Oh, I lost connection. Come on. How is it still streaming? I'm still connected to the internet, but this just breaks. I might have to just start drawing on my tablet. I mean, on the computer, if this continues to be such an issue. Okay. I like that from the last time we went over this, Rafi, we adjusted a figure to be more in perspective, and now he is. So that is great. For a big shot like this, one thing is, these are still exploratory sketches. I don't think that the perspective is entirely in the realm of like believability. It's so dramatic that we almost wonder how it works. But I think we could make it work if we added more in the scene. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding more because this is a really wide lens, which, good, experiment with that. The thing about a wide lens is that you see tons. Depth recedes very rapidly. So now this gate that is here is probably going to recede like this, and you'd see tons of gates. One thing you can do is have these sorts of things repeat in the background as well. Maybe this is a cart. So, I don't know, just some stuff that a wide angle lens, you're going to see lots of things. So you have to keep that in mind when thinking about what you are seeing. This sort of thing, especially possibly the reason why this doesn't hold up is while I didn't cover it, because that was outside of the realm of what the class wanted to teach, is Let's see if I can remember how to bridge this gap. Does that make it shorter or longer? I think it just makes it longer. Man, I might have to revisit my Scott Robertson, because there is the X duplication technique, which has you finding the center of the vanishing point, following that line, and then that repeats, and that way you can calculate the convergence in perspective. Well, there is also a rule for how to do that if you want to bridge something beyond a gap. So if you have this, and then you want another gap, there is a way, maybe it's this. But that doesn't make much sense to me. I don't think that's correct. So I will go and revisit that information and find it so that we can confidently think about that. In the future, if you really, an easy way to do that is to make some window assets. And that's why I have forgotten how to do this, because I basically don't ever do it. And this works better for me. Less ugly calculation and more just drawing and getting the stuff you need down without hassle. Okay. So I'm going to match up the original window to the same scale. And then I'm going to pull this down, and we're going to distort this so that it's being dragged down at the same rate. Now, this looks really large. If I want it to be 4 windows, then I can either match it up to that original distance, and we can see that the distance kind of changes some, or if I want to match that original scale, all right, so we now have windows that are like this. So that's a much tighter level of convergence, implying that you'd start to get windows that are more like this in scale, really, really tiny. And then all these buildings are going to shrink down a ton too, which is part of the reason why it doesn't quite work, because you have even spacing, not accounting for convergence. So different solutions. We can try to find the Scott Robertson method in the future, or you can you can make the layout, right? So you got these buildings, and each one comes out in front of the other, and each one has a cylinder. You can project that into space. And if you figured it out, if you got it the way you wanted to, you could use that as a layout. You can make that original layout much larger, duplicate it so you have the appropriate amount of towers for what you need or the scale that it creates. And then you would end up with something more accurate, maybe not as accurate as what the Scott Robertson thing would do, but that's how you could approach that. So, fun fact of the day. Okay, I might go a little faster on these so that we make sure we hit Matthias and Alexander. but this is cool. I think this is a good layout. This looks more sci-fi to me. We got simple shapes. If you were to detail this out, you can shear this off like we saw in Forerunner architecture. Add some exhaust. Smaller ones. Paneling. All of that, and then that scene would come to life. It would just be a matter of detailing. You could start putting cables in, stuff that leads the eye. And if you wanted this to stay clean, you could, or you could go grungy and add big pipes, all that sort of stuff. You can start adding in things that get away from these 90-degree corners. And that'll be a big focus on increasing believability going forward. But otherwise, like, the perspective on this stuff makes sense. I'd say with bigger scenes like this, think about how you can layer more. What else can you introduce that is going to fill out a scene? Put things in a space. Maybe there's another building down there. Who knows? It's like you'd be surprised at what you can do by just drawing a couple lines that go along the perspective grid. Doing that changes the shape of the building. So now you can have a new window that goes there and adds more complexity. So experiment with that. Experiment with coming out here and there. Just adding more. You can come in front of boxes that you have already. Have one down here. That sort of thing. Again, my changes are not gospel, and we don't need to push these any further than they've already been pushed. This is good. Now with the new knowledge that we have, we can think about blocking off corners, adding transitions, grime, starting with the focal area and detailing that out. Trash, cans, pipes for sewage. And then that's interesting, and then we can do some sort of thing that leads down to there. So all that I'm sketching out here is in support of your idea. How can we lead the eye down there? What can we add that helps block off and lead eyes here? We can add signs that, are pointing up in this sort of arc. More pipes. Enough busyness that this becomes an interesting area, and then you can leave this a little less interesting, but just a few lines to indicate that stuff is going on. Also here, this could be a panel, but it could also be interesting to have this come in, and maybe that is, that's an inside thing. Maybe this is some sort of overhang. Now you've got... So all I'm doing is following this extrusion line this way, and then layering in a bunch of nonsense detail. I do not know what it is, but I'm just following that extrusion plan. And instantly that adds, look how much layering that produces, how much depth that creates as a result. And so finding those opportunities for T-lines and overlaps is what's going to create a lot of depth. Really powerful tool there. Good job, Rafi. Awesome to see it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, Alexander, let's hit it. Okay, so I remember you had a question, and I'm going to look. Okay, so You mentioned that you felt like you struggled, found it hard. Maybe you could have broken the forms down more in your box compositions. You had some conflict with your references, so maybe a clearer direction from the start could have also helped. Okay, so I'll scroll up. Actually, I don't know where you posted your references anymore. I
I
don't know where
can
that is.
repost them if you like, but it was basically brutalist architecture with sci-fi.
Yeah, if you repost them, that'll help me have something to go off of. But let's see. So I can definitely see how there can be some issues, and part of it is my fault because I think I didn't show how to navigate from box to putting something in a box. So I apologize for that. It's because I think what I had forgotten to show is that you can take a box and you can either carve into it and work with it, work inside of it. So now that box is no longer defining exactly what you have. It was just there as original placement. That was important. I forgot to mention that the boxes you could put, you can put something spherical in it if you wanted. So I apologize for that. If we go over brutalist architecture is defined by large shapes. It can be any shape. That's the cool part of it, is something big, really big, defined, then tiny little scale. And Forerunner architecture is inspired by brutalism. So that is...
I've just dropped those references in the group chat.
Okay, excellent. I'll just pull it off to the side. Okay, so I'm seeing some references like, for one, you have some scenes where brutalist architecture is often defined by a simple, large statement. So if I'm looking at some of these, I see that you've got like this building here is a big reverse boat shape or just a boat shape. And then compositionally, you have a square of trees that comes down, supports it, and walls behind it. I see you got a low landscape with one building here, another building here, smokestacks. I see brutalist buildings in real life that are like this. And then you have all of the tiny little scale here that supports it. So you get that scale as a result of putting really, really small things and also isolating one big thing. And perhaps some of the compositions made that difficult, but I think for the most part, not really. The cool thing about brutalism is that it can be anything, any shape that you can make can be brutalist architecture. You can do hexagons. I've seen triangles. I remember seeing one that was like, it was just something absurd, As long as it's a big, simple piece, you can work with it. So if you were to try and adjust this one and you wanted that sense of scale, the first thing you might want to adjust is the scale of these doors. Or maybe we keep that scale there, but then we introduce all this that looks a lot smaller. And you can go with big blocks. If you want to cut this off, you can introduce naturalistic stuff to integrate it with I think we had mentioned this could be a mountain. And then that gives you opportunity to put trees and stuff like this. You can also show spaceships. And then show a bunch of small ones up in the air. So now you have an idea of the scale that you're seeing here. And then all of a sudden this doesn't feel as crazy, right? Like maybe it's not so abstract that you can't tell what's going on. To help with that, integrate all of these. If they're morphed in with the mountain, they'll follow that mountain shape. So we'll just quickly isolate all of those. So that creates cool opportunity for a mixture of natural and hard edges. And then if you wanted to detail that out with Brutalist, I'm seeing stuff like, maybe this will just come out. Just some general detail, because simple statements work best with Brutalism still, so it's not that far off to keep the box shapes. It works okay. Then let's see. Were there any ones that you wanted to be touched on in particular? Because I won't be able to touch all of them. I'll do, like 4 at the most.
No, not particularly. I mean, number 7, I went from orthographic view and then I transformed it onto the box, which was already there.
Nice.
And then I kind of sketched in the perspective afterwards.
Yeah, that's great. I see that. So you took this one, right? And then applied
That's
it.
That's right, yeah.
Good. That's really cool. I applaud you for doing that. Some of the stuff that you could apply is like, coming in, extruding and subtracting out so that you have some depth here. That'll add interesting complexity there. And will make it look a little more true to form, I suppose. I don't see any issues with this. This comes up, but it's just not in frame, so that's fine. And then if you wanted to support this more, let's see, we've got things are like this big. So maybe it's a garden. And these are all bushes. Supported by trees of this size. Then this is a path. This is a gate. And then this path goes on. And you could either continue this on and eliminate all of these lines. Maybe that was confusing you, or maybe you didn't know what to do with it all compositionally. You could get rid of that, start introducing some land and more buildings to work off of. Maybe this is a compound, so you got more in space, big gates with vehicles coming out of them. And that comparison of the small and the large right here will make all that come together and really sing. Then you can mirror that other one back here to finish it out. Does that help? Am I still connected?
Oh yeah, sorry. It's like taking more time to develop the idea and just keep pushing it further.
Yeah, I'd say for that one, it was mainly. Did it feel like you were getting trapped in working with boxes, and how do I turn this into that you were looking at?
Yeah, exactly. So it was like taking it to the next stage. I got to a certain point, and then I just couldn't think about what to do next, basically.
Yeah, that can be. I totally get it because I get that all the time as well. Um, I certainly used to get it and I didn't know what to do. I think if you come up with an idea and then if you try to plan your context around it,
Yeah, I think that might have been a part of the issue as well. Like not knowing exactly what the idea was before going into it, just kind of getting a load of reference and trying to stick it on top of my boxes, but having some kind of idea or a vision for the world that I was creating as well might have helped.
Yeah. So maybe if you were to apply that idea here, maybe these are two monolithic reverse boat structures, right? So they come down. And I'll get. So see, now I'm erasing this box away because I've got the structure in part. We used the box as general placement to get over the hurdle of how to put something somewhere. That was the goal of that original lesson was you put boxes down in a scene, those boxes can become a scene. That's fine. So you start working with that, and then you add your details. Then you can think, okay, well, how do I connect all this together so that this makes sense? We've got a pathway. Then this is going to come out, and maybe it's a larger street, and it can be a compound with more buildings on the side. Maybe it's interesting if they're like, in comparison to the big brutalist, maybe these are a bunch of huts. I don't know. And because I'm seeing that original reference that you had, and it was in the desert and palm trees and stuff. So I'm just thinking of like camels. These are just specs, but I'm thinking of camels, and then you can throw in sand dunes. And that can work and turn into something. You can build off of your original boxes. You can subtract your boxes. And then if it helps, erase what was there so that you can work with your new stuff.
That's a cool idea. It's like a little kind of 3D map, isn't it? And then you can go down place where the viewer is or the camera is, and then build the scene from there.
Yeah, that's a really good one too. The next week we're going to be talking about shoebox cutaways and how you can make things like that. And so we'll eventually touch on that. I haven't covered it yet, but it is helpful if you want to do that on your own time. I think this is cool. I really like this. There's a form of architecture called high tech, or let's look it up real quick, actually. I'll link this. I should have linked it last time. I apologize, but when I took my architecture, well, that's why, because I was planning on touching on it more later. But let's search my pins. Okay, can I search groups? I can. And I'll post these. Okay, so we got modern architecture and we have architecture for the eras. And the cool thing about modern is just how many small different variations of them there are. So I've got brutalism, we got modernism, and the one that yours reminded me of is structural expressionism. And look at that. That's the same form language right there.
That's cool, yeah.
So, yeah. So you can use that as a reference. And it's got that crazy tall spire, same thing. Then it's got this little panel that comes off to the side. You can have panels that get really small, show that scale, and then you can just add lines and see what happens there. For whatever reason, they do this X thing. So you can do that, and then you can come off here. And all this is patterning. This is, right now, I'm just thinking of it as patterns, if it will help for you to bypass that initial block. I'm going to double this up, make it feel larger. And then, so I think, you were there, buddy. It was just theming it out, taking what you see and applying it, not necessarily one-to-one if that was holding you up, but the ideas and the patterns that you see on them. So let's pull your references over again. And I'm seeing these guys. Okay. So that one in the bottom left corner, it's got like these little pyramid shapes. You can take that and run with it. Then they had these little things at the tops. I see those white lines that are adding the little cap. And then there's just some slight variation in the boxes themselves. They kind of rib out a little bit, so you can work with that. Show where they break. Make sure I'm on a layer where I can erase. So you can do this real quickly and accurately by just taking the line across on a separate layer and then pulling up. And coming down. Then erasing the stuff you don't need anymore. And applying it to your existing drawing. Okay, and then I think I see they got tiny little windows up at the top. So that's interesting. What if you mirrored that? We saw that sword on the Paul Richards design blog. So that's an interesting shape that you can take. And then, that theme becomes pretty interesting, I think. We'll do one more. I'll touch on this one. So it looks like you got caught up in the mirroring of the architecture, but I see that you were breaking into your boxes and applying stuff. So that's great. That's exactly what what we wanted you to do. I think we could come in here and you can start layering on top, which that's the important part that you kind of have to juggle with, which is getting over that hurdle of what's here is the only thing I'm working with. So I'm seeing again, your reference in the lower left has that big stairway. So maybe we want a big stairway. And it's to keep in scale, it's going to be a little smaller. And then there will be an entrance here. And then that can also repeat itself over here. Detailing out stairs is really tedious, and I don't think that we'd really want to. It would be important to show scales, so we need some stuff that shows that like these would be trees. Again, doesn't have to be trees, but that's just something quickly to indicate. And then you can add some land, some layering of land. Then again, mirror that in another location, but smaller. That's a common strategy for building out a world, is And extending your form language is to copy what you have, but just reverse it some. And then that can be the scene there. Again, here you would try to extend that out just to add some more depth. I don't know, but we're just extruding and subtracting. That's the whole idea. If you don't necessarily have to have anything in mind when doing this. If you wanted to, like if you didn't come up with the idea for putting stairs there, but you said, let's add another one of these and just say I want it to be behind, that will work. You can then repeat it, or you can shrink it down. And the main goal is getting over that hump of isolating in with that tunnel vision on exactly what you had laid down originally. So that is thinking gesturally, which we want to get over. So in terms of progression, where we've gone with this is we've gone from boxes make scenes to grouping for arrangement. And now we're getting less and less technical. So we moved on to theming. And now you can move that theming to gesture. And so all of a sudden, you can start thinking about what else can go here if it mirrors that shape language, if it's a star, if it's hexagons. How can I put hexagons around in this scene? Or just add stuff, leading lines, what can go in these leading lines with the shape arrangements? That way you can think ideas through faster and get over that hurdle. And I totally understand the pain because I experience it constantly. And only lately have I started to get over that hurdle myself. So I hope that helps, Alexander.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
Yeah. That's where I'll cut it off. And then Matthias, let's go, buddy.
Yay.
All right. So we got references. Okay, cool. Kampong Fluke. And so it's like it's a water village shanty town.
Yeah, but let me interrupt you. I wasn't like my main focus was like in the stilts. I really love like the constructions over this like stilts. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I like that too. So tall stilts, everything's topped off with a triangle, boxy houses, and then really large, wide scale Julian. Cool. I'll match the background for now. Actually, I'd do that on a separate layer. Okay. I dig it. So these work really well. What I'm seeing that I think is especially positive is I see that you've got the shape arrangement here, which is, this is a prime example of that application that I hope you at least started off that way, that you had this.
Yeah, definitely, man.
Okay, awesome. Because it works so well. It creates this leading line, but you're filling it in with something totally different from the original shape. They're boxes in perspective, but it still works because now you have this natural grouping that leads up to an area of interest. And the biggest thing that I see with these is just continuing the scene. I think the theming and the sketching is going pretty well. I say even compositionally, I like what's going on. It would just be a matter of where's the rest of the world, right? So these buildings are this size? Do you have more coming like this and then they recede and maybe it's a circle? And then, so like they're all like this. Or is there going to be like another big one back here that also has its own thing? And then let's see what else is in your reference. Let's pull it up.
I like that idea.
Submissions, reference. In the real reference, they're in flat land, so no room for mountains, really. So it would either be stuff like clouds.
I was thinking that instead of like water, they are like in this really high, like above clouds.
Okay. Okay, well then
yeah.
So then you would kind of get some mountains.
Yeah,
You can close that off and you just keep layering that in. Close off these corners with a cloud. That sort of thing. So you can continue that. Same here. I would suggest we want to stay within this triangle that you've got, this shape arrangement that you did, which I am proud of. Let's get those stilts in and then keep working in more buildings. We could even, like, well, if this building is here, I'm thinking of adding some sort of foreground element. What if there was, this boat, but it would take the place of no. But in general, it would just be continuing the scene. So mountains.
The boat idea, I dig it.
What was that? Sorry.
The boat idea. I mean, using more boats in the composition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's find boats.
This will be like flying boats. Yeah.
That would be cool. You could definitely roll with that. So there could be a boat there that fills out that. And then again, just if you really want this to feel like G. Lulian, he's got these get so dense with buildings. So just keep layering them on. You can, of course, fit them within the original. You can even fit new buildings in here. It doesn't, maybe. You could try.
Yeah, man, the architecture density that Jim Dillon has, it's like amazing. Man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, I don't know how he does it. So you draw new stuff so that there is layering of things going on. And then finish it off with those. I don't want to mess up your original shapes too much, but show that there is still stuff.
Nice.
That's my general sentiment with all of these sketches, is just show that the world doesn't end. Okay. So for these, I see these are looser, so you probably didn't have time to clean them up or anything.
Yeah.
I like
Sorry.
that. No. I don't care. It's fine. It's really fine. We're on holiday. I like that you were experimenting with scale here. So you got these really far out. These are way farther from in the distance than the other stuff. So if we want to, let's just indicate that this is water here. And you can still hear me, right? My camera just disconnected. Okay.
Nice.
So see, now you got this ground plane. The mountains will layer on themselves a bit. And we'll do the same over here. But I forgot that you mentioned clouds. So, but the same could apply right? Here, where it's, cloud structures, because you want to show that they aren't going down infinitely. With paint, you could indicate it differently. With line, you have to work. You have to think about how your shapes and overlaps work, which is, I haven't practiced that as much, so I am struggling with it as myself. But stuff like that might make it look a little fluffier. Then, if you want that shantiness, you've got a looseness going on, but try tilting things. Try breaking these lines some, adding some damage, so if you got these planks, then you can break those up, have one plank that comes out and then goes back to normal. Then you can tie these together, you can knots. Stuff like that will allow you to easily, quickly get detail. And then you can plan out your path from here. Get some geometry in there, so just random layering, and now that path is forced to follow it. Comes down and then over, and finally connects here. And then you have lots of small buildings. Different in size and shape, that are running down the side, like so.
Nice.
So all of that, like this, it even surprises myself, because I don't work this way when I'm working. It's only when I'm in this critique mode and this lesson mode where I'm trying to work faster that this all comes together. But this whole gestural thing, this is the biggest thing that Kaysen talked about in World Building 1, was staying loose, being loose. Every time he did a demo, that was like the number one word that he said, because it's so much faster to put a line down and see if it does what you want it to, or sparks an idea, because then that will allow you to build off of it, and you can quickly erase. Nothing is permanent, and you're not attached to something, right? So just like that, you get detail, but you say, this could be either more refined, or I don't want it to be just that. I want it to be like a big fishing post that people hang their fish from if this were water, right? And that can be there. Or if it's an airboat, then you've got your boats on the sides, and you've got this boat. So you can gesture that in really quickly and worry about the construction of it later. And that'll help you. I think, like, I hadn't looked at this yet, but this is really good. So, I mean, really good for the looseness, right? That you're gesturing in and thinking about what your ideas are,
Yeah.
which is exactly what you want to do. It'd be fun to do this from an animation point of view where it teeter-totters and then you put things out here that are a little too wonky. Maybe it's falling off some. Then you cover that up with land. That sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, so is there anything else that you're interested in asking about or any difficulties that you had, Matthias?
I will love to that you critique my one perspective.
Oh, I missed.
Submission. Yeah,
I missed one page.
Just to know what your thoughts on.
Oops, different. This one? I missed this one.
Yeah, that one. Sorry to keep you.
No, it's fine. I'm on holiday too, so I've got nowhere to be. I'm just doing class. Okay. So you wanted critique on the perspective or how to expand these, like we've been doing?
Yeah, and how to expand, because after the previous critique, now I know that like the bottom left it needs like more world, right? And also the top right needs more world too.
Yes, exactly. It's like I don't have any real issues with what's going on that's here. So all of that is fine. And this is good. Like you've got perspective working out, you've got layouts. This is like introducing a path as a super vital element. This is a really cool idea of having foreground stairs. Like awesome. Good job. It's purely just the just expanding the world. So I think it'd be interesting just to see if you can mirror this out one more time. You can't realistically have these that much taller, right? But you could try a couple more.
Yeah, like to get the density, right?
Yep. And so all I'm doing there is just repeating the shape you have, but just trying to fit it somewhere else. And just enough so that you know that there's more beyond what you see. And then if you're looking straight up, what would you see? It'd probably just be clouds, right? But it would be hard. I think this would work better in a painting sort of aspect, because otherwise you're going to be drawing clouds, which you could figure out like maybe there's one taller building here, one taller building that is the focus.
Yeah.
That, and then it's got its own like thing on top of it with stuff that makes it more important. It's got its own thing going on. And now your clouds can either, you can come up with a design that works for you, that thinks about big, medium, and small shapes. Or it could be, you could just keep going with the circularism, which might be a lot, but, circles of clouds makes it stormy, that sort of thing. And here, is this cloud or water?
Yeah, it's supposed to like be sketchy clouds.
Okay, so clouds. The main thing I would say is just getting that overlap of clouds with the mountains. That's the most important part that shows the material and the subject. This part it's still important, but it's less important than that transition that shows how it bumps up to other things. So, like for instance, when you have a box in a field of grass, you don't worry about every single blade of grass. If you have a house, you don't worry about every single blade of grass. You show that transition of grass here, some rocks there, and then you don't draw all this. Yeah? That's how you get that indication that the grass is here, and then it stops with the next thing that changes. So that's what we're doing here. We're setting up clouds, we're getting overlaps, and we're transitioning into the mountains. And then yeah, so this would just be getting more density. If you could do like a yin yang symbol, this could be either more buildings or it could be mountains, and then this can be like you can put buildings on this hill, or it can be a cloud. All sorts of stuff. I like that you have these going in opposite directions. If you really want to go for that chaotic feel, then you can start tilting them as well. That's not tilted. Tilt, tilt. So that it's facing us more. And then just a little bit of side plane. This one's really tilted to the side, so that sort of thing. That'll start adding to the natural feeling of the village, rather than it being 90-degree angles on a grid and just picking one or two directions. You would want to start leaning them in ways where you have one that's a primary side, one that's another, and now they've that was another poor example, rats. But notice, guys, how I'm drawing on top of a drawing that I just made. Like that, once you put something down, that doesn't define the last thing that can fit there. You can put something new on top of it, and that'll instantly add more depth. You can fit another building there if you figured out how it sat in space. So that's important. And yeah.
Nice, man. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, that's what I'd go over. And I think that's a decent amount of critique for everybody. So thanks, guys, for sitting through with me for 3.5 long hours of disconnecting internet. But I will post these notes and the critiques, since we have a little more critique of value that you might want to keep a hold of. I'll post all that in the Discord. And let's see, next week, what's that date? January 5th. Okay, so that's a fine day. We'll do January 5th. The next week we'll be doing shoebox interiors. So those will be fun. And again, push-ups. You can try refining some of the stuff that you've done for fun if you want to, but these are what we'll go with. The goal would be to have them done from imagination, but I totally get it from the confusion of just working with what you have. So if you want to find inspirational and real-world art references for another mood board, you can do that. And then you can create compositions that are inspired. So if you see a cool composition from an artist that you like, we can just go to ArtStation, and I'm sure the first thing that we pick up is going to be cool. It can even be, you can manipulate and use layouts from stuff that aren't related to your subject. That way it can be inspired or even use the same layout, but you can use it for something else. For instance, this Starfish City has a low horizon line with a thing and a building that lives up here with a spiraling idea. And then another one repeated in the background. Foreground element, person, path. You can take that and then you can work with that, revise it, make a new one, and draw it with your own boxes, cylinders, or theme applied to it instead. In general, if you don't have a theme in mind and you just want to work with pipes and boxes and just kind of make these dingy, grungy environments, that's totally cool as well. This is practice for getting used to working with environments, not necessarily trying to get anything that is refined. So push-ups, they're good to keep in mind and practice with. Go back and look at the other notes. Think about how earlier when Gandalus asked about different thumbnails, you can think about a top-down, you can think about 3/4, you can think about all these different forms of framing, long lens, flat, and graphic. How you can use those to your advantage to make a scene that inspires something as a result. So that's the homework. And any questions before we're done? Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thanks for hanging out, you guys. And I'll talk to you.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate that, mate.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Enjoy your new year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
You too. Happy New Year.
You too, man.
Bye, guys.